Hey guys, thank you very much for joining today. My name's Kieran. I've been the organizer of the WebVR, WebAR meetup for, gosh, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months. So it's still a pretty new group, but we've had great turnout. We've had folks here present from Google, Samsung, Ricoh. It's been a great turnout. So I'm excited about our guest today. Before we do that, I wanted to do some quick announcements and give you guys a little bit of context about what it is that we do here. And I also need to do a final check to make sure that we're broadcasting on YouTube, because that was one of the commitments that we were gonna provide for other folks who could not attend today. So we're gonna do just real quick. I did post it to the meetup. Yep, it's already on there. So here's some feedback if this is broadcasting. Awesome, great, cool. So first I'm gonna start by sharing my screen and providing just a couple updates about what we're here to do. And then we're gonna hand it over to Esteban. So folks have asked me why we're doing this meetup, what's the purpose here? So immersive computing is a term that I've heard a lot that combines the concepts of virtual reality, augmented reality, 360 video into kind of one term. And so it's something that we're seeing is coming very quickly. It's in the headsets, it's the HTC Vives, the high-end headsets, but it's also in our mobile devices. It's available today. So far, a lot of that has really been distributed through app stores, essentially downloaded applications from one centralized area. And one of our core beliefs is that we will be much better served if this is an open platform that runs on the web. So that's the whole idea of web-based AR and web-based VR, is that you can access this cool functionality without locking it down into an app store, and to have open standards, essentially, so that everyone has a say in how this stuff works together. So the goal of this meetup is really to promote web-based VR and AR. And there's a couple primary goals. So networking, which you guys are able to do over the past 30 minutes. We also want to be able to provide education. So that's the goal of Esteban's talk today, to be able to really give us a perspective of what his company is doing, how they're using virtual reality on the web, and also the blockchain to combine these elements together. And then we also want to provide collaboration. So if you're working on a project and you're looking for other people to help you, or if you're looking to get involved with a project, this is a great environment to meet folks. There's already been a couple people that got jobs here at this meetup by simply meeting other people who are working on projects, looking for developers that had the experience doing WebVR. So you're in the right place if you're looking for employment as well. I wanted to give a quick thanks to some of our sponsors. Bright Cove provides this space. They provide food and drink and this equipment, so I wanted to thank them real quick. Bright Cove is an online video streaming company, and I've been helping them provide a 360 video streaming product. So I've introduced WebVR to them. So they have a standards compliant way of providing a web-based way of consuming 360-degree video. And then finally, before we get started, there's two events I wanted to make people aware of. One that's coming up by a friend of mine who's a former lawyer who now teaches at UC Berkeley. They're having what they're calling a blockchain academy. It's a 3-day program. It is paid, so it's like a couple $1,000s, and it's like a very intense program. It's 3 days. It's in the middle of November. Registration ends on November 1st. So if you're really serious and you want to consider a career move to do something in crypto, this could be an interesting way to get up and running very, very quickly. Another event, if you're really interested in VR, and I'll put these links on the meetup, by the way, so you guys can access these. If you're really excited about VR, and specifically in the classroom, there's an event called EdTech Connect that's happening also in the middle of November. It's in San Ramon. It's specifically for educators or students. So whether that's you or if you know educators that want to learn how to use VR or AR in the classroom, this is a really cool event. I've helped participate in it before. If you're in that space for education, it's a really cool event to share with folks. So, any questions before we get started? I'm going kind of fast. Okay, great. So the format of this meetup is we'll have 1 or 2 keynote speakers. So today we have Esteban from Decentraland, and we'll do an intro in a second. And then we'll take a little break. If folks need to head out, they can head out. And then we'll have what I would call like an open mic. So folks that are working on projects, I've already heard from a couple of folks that want to show off. We'd really love to see that. We typically give like a 3 to 5 minute limit so that we can kind of get through a couple different things. We have an HTC Vive set up. We also have a Samsung S8 if you do like augmented reality stuff or want to show mobile, we can screen share that. So we have pretty much anything that you want to any sort of reasonable hardware for WebVR, we can show that. We'd love to see what people are working on. Yeah. Yeah, totally. The question was if there's something in blockchain, can you show that? Absolutely. So today, blockchain is part of the meetup, so it totally qualifies. Great. So Esteban, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. We're going to switch back over, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Awesome. So you're seeing a portion of the crowd here. I'd say maybe there's like 25 folks here, and we're all excited. Let's say hi to Esteban. Hello.
Hey, everyone.
Hey. So I'll do a really quick intro, then I'll hand it over to you. So I've met Esteban, gosh, maybe it was about a month or two ago. I've been a big fan of WebVR, as you guys can tell. Esteban and his team have been working on Decentraland for quite a while. We got connected because they are now looking to use open source technology as the foundation for the project that he'll talk to you about. And so I was really excited to hear what they do, and although he's not here in San Francisco, I thought it'd be great to kind of bring the spirit of what they're doing here to San Francisco to connect the dots, and then we'll broadcast this online as well. So Esteban, I hope that was a good introduction.
Yes, indeed. Thanks a lot for having me here. First of all, I'd like to ask you how many of you are familiar with the concept of blockchains, what blockchains exist out there?
Show of hands. So we have maybe 3/4 of the room.
All right. That'll make things a lot easier. I'm getting a little bit of a feedback.
I will mute
the audio. Okay. Well, that's perfect. Okay, so I'd like to first tell you about one second. I think it's myself. Oh, yeah. Way better. So I'd like to first tell you about the motivation and the history of Decentraland, how it started as an idea to build an open shared virtual reality world. Then I'll introduce some of the architectural aspects of it. It basically builds on top of 3 layers of data persistence, how we use Ethereum to keep a ledger of ownership of parcels in this virtual reality world, how we use IPFS to serve the content like 3D models and textures, and then the peer-to-peer layer built on top of this, used to handle positions, chat, and other ephemeral non-persistent data. After this, I'll show a demo of a world editing tool that we are creating based out of the A-Frame editor, A-Frame inspector. And before starting a round of questions, I'll share some of the most relevant challenges that we are facing. So the inspiration for Decentraland came from an array of different science fiction novels like Snow Crash or Ready Player One. It was also inspired by the advent of the Oculus development kits. And as well, it came from our own work on Bitcoin, blockchain, and other distributed systems. We wanted to create a virtual reality world based on open standards. We think that such a world should be run in a decentralized way, in the same sense that nobody will think on shutting down the internet. Building Decentraland as an application run by a network that can be shut down. The virtual reality world described by Neil Stephenson in the Snow Crash novel is probably the one sci-fi world that most resembles the vision of what we're building, even though there's this other novel, Ready Player One, which also describes a pretty similar world. In this world, there was a company that ran the world, the simulation. But a key aspect of our project is that we're trying to avoid any godlike powers for anyone, any company or group to change the world's rules. So what this means ultimately is that at some point we must be able to flip a switch, turn off all of our servers, and at that point the world should continue running. And the way that we think that this can happen is that we must set up appropriate appropriate incentives for the multiple actors of the ecosystem to keep it online. So our main difference with other open source VR projects is that our focus is on building an economy inside of this world. Creating this economy is enabled by cryptocurrencies, the Internet of Value, this new system of transmitting payments over the internet, which quite a novel approach that allows instant payments among strangers. Given that with blockchain payments, you will never be afraid again of putting in your credit card details on a website. That's not the way this works, given that the access-based approach of credit cards require trust and central validators to work. With blockchains, for the first time in history, we have a mechanism to keep secure ledgers, databases, and accountability without trusting anyone, but trusting everyone on aggregate. A subtle difference. You don't trust anyone as an individual, but you trust everyone as a group, as an ecosystem. So we are trusting the system that enforces the rules through code, but you don't trust the actors. The problem with cryptocurrencies right now is that it's quite hard to get inside the system. There are high barriers to entry composed of learning how to create a wallet, how to register with an exchange, learning the basics of how it works. And even once you are in the system, there are still a lot of nuances like high fees, high confirmation times, minutes or hours to settle. There's the price volatility. And I think that this is all because we are too early into the technology, but things are changing. In particular, there's this project called the Lightning Network, which I think it's the single most important technology that has been built over the past months. It's a system to add micropayments to Bitcoin, what it's called a layer 2 system of transactions. And these transactions have almost no fees and have near instant settlements, which are two of the biggest problems with Bitcoin right now. I don't want to delve into the details of how it works, but yeah, just keep in mind that these instant micropayments that could be payments in the order of $1,000 could allow for paying for access to APIs, paying for bandwidth, or even electricity could be bought and sold with very low costs of transacting. So open source is not enough for users to be owners, to be in control of the platform. I think that there are many definitions of what a blockchain is. You'll get a different answer probably for every person you ask. But one particular incomplete definition I like to present for the purpose of presenting Decentraland is that it's an open database with a fixed rule set of what kinds of updates are allowed on this database. The fact that a system of permissions and a rule set for validating operations is a core feature of this database, turns that in some sense into a blockchain. In contrast to the databases that power any application on the internet nowadays, the users are more in control of the platform and can actually see the code and the execution of the database operations and validate by themselves the enforcement of the rules. That's why I think that users have more control of the platform, more ownership when it's built on top of this open database system. And all these aspects, I think, will make Decentraland a very different experience from other platforms. Decentraland is about a virtual community with economic relationships where no central authority can change the rules of the game. It's more than an open source project. It's an open economy owned by its community. And we also envision that the ability to fork the source code will create various levels of customization and experimentation. The possibility to hack your own vision of the world, but in a way that still allows you to share the experience of the world with others, because you share the same rule sets but you may have different implementations over the same protocols. So pretty much like having one web, but multiple browsers. So with that introduction to what we want to build, I'd like to tell you now a little bit about our story, the story of our project. We started a couple of years ago, created a blockchain-based $1 million website, which we called our Stone Age. And people would use their CPU to mine this blockchain. And instead of Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, the mining reward was pixels in this $1 million website. So you could change the colors of the pixels you own, transfer them to other users. And this was all done as a first experiment of ownership for digital goods using a blockchain. Not all pixels are equal. It's non-fungible. Each pixel has their own XY coordinates. And last year, we changed the web page for a 3D virtual world, what we called our Bronze Age. Within that XY coordinate that you owned, you now could link to a torrent file instead of a color. This torrent file would host the information, models, and textures needed to display a 3D scene. And this scene was bound to the limits of a parcel of land on those XY coordinates. So this world could be explored, but it was quite a static experience, and no interaction was possible between users of the application that were connected at the same time. And now we're focusing on building a social in-world experience, what we call the Iron Age. This has a lot of challenges and very interesting problems to solve. And the things that we are focusing the most on at the moment are the performance of it. This experience needs to be smooth, and usually decentralization is a compromise on performance. Then there's the security aspects of it, which is another compromise that we have to take between allowing for more features to script the experiences of the world. And that is a compromise with how secure it is for users to run the client. The more features, the larger the attack surface for bugs and vulnerabilities. Of course, creating the ability for users to exchange value in the virtual world is very important for realizing this project. And lastly, the project is all about enabling our community to create the experiences that they envision. So this is very important for us. So how are we building this? When mentioning the history of the project and its motivation, I just introduced some of the aspects of how the Decentraland works. And I'd like to share some more details about what we are building right now. I'll cover the blockchain aspects of Ethereum, of Decentraland, how we use Ethereum to power this, how that connects to IPFS to serve the land contents. Then I'll talk a little bit about the real-time communications, the peer-to-peer layer that uses WebRTC at the moment. And I'll introduce our current experiments on building a web client for Decentraland using A-Frame, how we modified the A-frame inspector for a collaborative world editing tool, and some other applications that we envisioned that could be built on top of the ecosystem. So first, we are using the Ethereum blockchain as the base layer to keep the information about land ownership. The process of acquiring a land parcel and modifying its content and transferring land are all encoded into Ethereum's virtual machine code. It's a transparent process. Anybody can audit it. We currently have a testnet version deployed of the land smart contract. And selling these land parcels is the source of our funding for the project. We hosted a token sale last August that allowed us to raise enough money to continue building this world. Each land parcel is a mapping from an XY coordinate associated to an owner and its metadata. The owner of this parcel authenticates using a private key, but it can also be another smart contract that owns the land. This allows for a lot of features that can be built on top of it that are pretty cool. We'll explore some of those later. And another thing that we are using Ethereum for is that we plan to transfer the future income of selling land into what it's called this decentralized autonomous organization, a system that automatically executes transactions given certain rules with certain governance built into it. There's a project named Aragon 1 that is aiming to build a framework to create these kinds of organizations. And it's mostly about coming together and deciding between the stakeholders of the organization how the money should be used. So hosting land contents and paying for the bandwidth, that's something that we could pay for with micropayments from using the Lightning Network. And those payments could come directly from the proceeds of selling new land parcels. But that's not the only thing that we could do with these proceeds. The community of landowners could decide to pay for further developments or features for the project. But the technologies to build these DAOs is not quite there yet. It's pretty early. So that was how we are using Ethereum. And from Ethereum, then as we used to link to a torrent file, we are now linking to an IPNS, IPNS domain that points to an IPFS hash object and allows us to decouple every update to the world from every transaction that we need to make to the Ethereum blockchain. It's a layer of indirection using a DHT. DHT is a decentralized hash table. So we used to use BitTorrent, but given the topology and the nature of what contents were being transmitted, we usually have multiple connections with the same peers, and BitTorrent wasn't built to work that way that much. So instead of building our own modification of BitTorrent, we switched it over to using IPFS. Well, then the next layer, the peer-to-peer layer for non-persistent data, allows clients to connect to each other. From the parcel description found linked to from Ethereum and getting distributed through IPFS, the landowner can signal what rendezvous server to use in order to establish the WebRTC connections. This allows for establishing connections in a decentralized manner. The clients can see other players, what their position is, establish voice chat, and get other information from other users like avatars and items that the other users are using. So given that a pure peer-to-peer network will not scale in terms of the bandwidth required, everyone has to set up a connection to every other user that they can see, and that's n square in general bandwidth required, where n is the number of participants. At some point, we will need to resort to a more centralized way of calculating the spatial audio output for each client through a centralized audio server that will work in a similar way than the rendezvous server. We currently have a prototype implementation of a client that runs on top of WebGL. It was originally built by Ben Nolan, the creator of SynVR, one of the first social VR experiences out there. It loads land parcel descriptions from an IPFS gateway. So that's another compromise on centralization. Fetching the data from a gateway is not the same as running IPFS per se. This land descriptions don't use A-frame, but a markup language that is pretty similar and mostly compatible. It uses WebRTC to connect to different users and has a voice chat capability. It also uses Canon.js to provide a very basic physics system, and it downloads the data for each parcel from Ethereum, again using a centralized gateway, but that's good enough for the moment. And a key thing when building virtual worlds is how the content creators build these worlds. We started experimenting a couple of weeks ago with adapting the A-frame inspector to edit Decentraland scenes, since our community is organizing itself in groups to build different districts, themed neighborhoods that are being proposed for Decentraland. This editor tool needed to be collaborative, and we are using WebRTC to sync changes between clients in real time. This channel is also used for chat via text and voice. We have a feature to upload the land contents, the parcel contents, which is just the markup at the moment, but we are planning on adding traversing the DOM tree and extracting every URL and also publishing that to IPFS. We are running an IPFS node that stores and serves all of these contents. So this tool allows our community members to start tinkering with A-frame. Some of them are coders, but some are not. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to introduce new people into the open source software world and into A-frame. You can check this out on editor.decentraland.org. As this is a very early alpha, I'll appreciate it if you run into any issues, please let me know. So I believe that many of you here must be acquainted with A-frame inspector. Yeah. Okay, cool. So only one hand raised. Okay, a couple of hands raised. Okay, I'll show you then the demo for this. Sorry. Um,
So about half the room has heard of A-Frame.
oh, hello? Okay. Okay, so I think that I didn't deploy the latest version. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So somebody was playing around with this scene. So within this virtual world, virtual editor, you can set up the different values. This is 270. Okay, this is turned upside down. The lining is also a little bit off, but yeah, you can copy and paste this. This is being okay.
This is all running in the browser, and this is showing off the ability within the browser then to create the scene, and you're modifying different aspects of the objects that are in the scene.
Yeah. So I'm not quite sure why the lining is behaving so odd. Probably this object has some. Okay. So okay. Well, so you can see there are some people, here connected. We're chatting here. The light is a little bit. Okay, so there's probably something. Okay. Anyways, you can edit the different objects that are here, their position, rotation, scale. You can add more models that can come from any URL that has whitelisted cross-origin requests from this editor.decentraland.org. When you click here, it uploads everything to IPFS. It provides you with the hash that you can later check out in your own IPFS node. And yeah, this is leveraging this this editor that was built for A-Frame.
It looks like other people are editing the scene in real time. Someone's messing with the red.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Changes are being synced in real time between all users on the same scene. Yeah, the latest version should fix this same scene lack of multiplexing between different scenes. Okay, so
you seem you're mentioning all the bugs, but I think you should recognize also what you've created is really cool and unique. And I think we should do a quick round of applause because you're showing a lot of effort. Multiple users are coming together and creating content at the same time. And
yeah, it's pretty cool actually. So a part of the client, the immersive experience, the editor, there are other aspects that this world is going to need. So, by the way, we are already thinking on how to make the A-frame inspector more being used within VR. We're thinking about ideas on how the UX for that will work, kind of like in a similar sense than the palette works for the tilt brush, or all of that user experience. So the other things that we are working on building are a land management tool to buy, sell, and manage the contents that you are displaying on your land. We're also looking to build a virtual version of Zillow or Airbnb to buy, sell, and rent land in Decentraland. We're working on tools for decentralized governance based on the fact that the landowner can be also a smart contract and establish rules for districts to govern on what kinds of contents can be hosted on their land, like some sort of homeowners association governance on top of a district or a neighborhood. These are just some initial ideas that we have. We hope that as we add scripting and more capabilities to the world, a lot of new inventions will be thought of from the community. And yeah, so to summarize, we have a ledger of ownership for each parcel of the world, which is the most persistent aspect of the data that we handle on Decentraland. We distribute the assets using IPFS, which is also getting a little bit of echo again. So on top of that, we have Emerald transit data transmitted over a peer-to-peer network on top of IPFS. I've shown you some prototypes of the world viewer. Wait, I'm going to stop this. I showed you some of the prototypes, a sneak peek into what are the other tools that we want to build on top of this. This is a pretty ambitious project with a lot of challenges. These are some of the things that we are working on in the short term. The UX of VR experiences and the tools to manage land. That's quite difficult to build. The interactions with the blockchain are usually slow. The ecosystem is a little bit too early. And well, that's something that we have to cope with. Also, as with any content platform, there are some issues with adult content, illegal, undesirable content. We're looking for ways to prevent the platform from being used to distribute illegal content or other sorts of legal activities. Since we are focusing on building an economy for this world, the client has to act as a cryptocurrency wallet. And this further complicates the development by increasing the security requirements for this piece of software. The Lightning Network is very early, but we plan on using that to create incentives for IPFS storage and bandwidth, low latency and quality of service. And lastly, but most importantly, this platform needs to perform fast, and that's going to be quite a challenge to build on top of the browser. But I think that it's doable, at least sometime at some point in the future. I think that we will be able to have something in there. So I hope you liked the presentation, the project. If anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Awesome. Well, first of all, Esteban, let's do another round of applause for all the work you guys have put into this. As someone who's done a lot of WebVR stuff in the past, just tackling the issue of multiple users, having the ability to edit and create an environment, that alone is a difficult thing to do. And I'm not really at all experienced with the blockchain. So that that whole thing is also a monumental accomplishment. So congratulations that you guys have gotten this far. We also got a couple of comments on YouTube, and the reason why we had feedback was because of actually a feature in the editor. So there's voice chat.
Oh, yeah.
Who were also in the editor, they were watching online, they went to the editor, that created the feedback loop. So
okay.
it's something, it's hard to demo that, but we saw it in the the audio that we had.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have one question. What's been the biggest issue with WebRTC, multiple users and audio?
So right now, for every user that you have on scene that you are connected to and want to hear from, you need to establish a direct channel to that user, and that takes up a lot of bandwidth. Currently, like up to between 4 or 8 users already start to lag your connection, and what is used generally for in like other kinds of systems, like less decentralized, is that one server picks up the microphone input from every user in the scene, calculates the spatial output for every user, and transmits that back. That reduces the amount of bandwidth that each user has to have, the amount of bandwidth that the server has to handle. But that's an okay compromise, definitely.
Who else has a question? John?
I'd like to learn more about the neighborhood governance or how like groups have split up and how governance is going to work Decentraland.
Could you hear that?
Yes. So the question was about governance of the districts. So we want to enable the district leaders or owners to set up some kinds of rules for policing over the content, to establish an aesthetic within their district. There are some districts like there's a Dragon City, a community of Chinese-based users that want to set up their own aesthetic. There's also a cypherpunk neighborhood that only wants to allow certain kinds of like buildings and experiences in there. And the kind of governance that we're talking about is that at the same time allowing users to kind of like rent land parcels to build, to contribute their own creations within the same neighborhood. But the fact that land parcels are owned in the blockchain, like you cannot take it away from someone, from some neighbor, the land that they already own. So the way that this will work is that all the land parcels of the neighborhood are owned by a smart contract that has a governance system that can be some kind of democracy or some kind of dictatorship, where some guy says, okay, I didn't like the content that you've been putting up in your parcel, you are out of the neighborhood. Stuff like that.
Another question, Mark.
Does that answer the question? Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good start.
Yeah.
Next.
What exactly are you storing on the blockchain?
The question is, what exactly are you storing on the blockchain?
Okay, so the repo is out there in github.com/decentraland/land. We are storing a mapping from XY coordinates, actually a hash of the XY coordinates. And that mapping goes to an address and a string. And that string is a locator. It's an IPNS locator address, and that IPNS address points to an IPFS address. And right there, you have a content description of the land parcel, like what other land parcels are owned by the same person, what assets you should be prefetching in order to load the whole scene. What is the main description of the land contents, the scene that needs to be shown, and then some other fields for policy that should be client-side enforced, stuff like if I want to build a temple or some kind of like meditation center, and I want the users that get into my parcel to mute all audio communications by default, I should be able to signal that to the clients, or things that I don't allow users to fly inside of my parcel, stuff like that, like policies.
So then to be clear, what you're saying is that there's an Ethereum address, and then there's associated with that on the blockchain is a hash of X and Y, and that's it as far as what's actually stored on the Ethereum network?
Yeah, it's the address of the owner, which is 40 bytes long, and the IPNS address, which I think it's about 60 bytes or something like that.
So when you update your land, let's say, and you add new structures, you're actually updating that on IP. The IPNS changes which IPFS hash that it points to?
Exactly. Yeah, that way you don't have to, every time that you want to update your land content, you don't have to spend Ethereum to update that. Of course, you could directly point to an IPFS object and forget this indirection created with IPNS, but I think that most people will probably use the IPNS DHT.
In other words, you could create a completely static land that can never be changed, or you can use IPNS to have that be dynamic, that you could change it. Sheridan?
Exactly.
I have two related questions. Can you hear me?
I can repeat it.
A little bit low, yeah, but
Okay. All right. I have two related questions about land ownership. In a way, it seems you require clear land ownership, and two questions. One is, most of it isn't on paper documents in many towns around the world. So how do you have to transfer it all from paper into digital documents? And then the second is, in many countries, there is no clear land ownership because they're slums and people just took over. So that's the other issue.
yes, so this system could be used for land ownership in the real world. There have been some experiments with that. I know that in Sweden, there have been some experiments to translate all of the land ownerships information from the, I don't know how to say that in English, but it's cadastre or something like that in Spanish. The record of ownership of all lands for that country. Since we are creating a virtual reality worldwide with no mapping to real world coordinates or I don't think that we are overstepping on any terrain governance of the real world.
So it's not intended to be a one-to-one mapping with the real world, but it doesn't preclude someone from choosing to say, hey, this district will map to the real world.
Exactly.
That's an option. We have time maybe for one or two more questions, if people have them. Yes.
Your team that made sure you're like on the front page of Reddit like 3 times a week before your ICO. Like, can you talk more about like all like process that you put your like blockchain professionals to create ICO results that you have? Like, because a lot of people need to learn like how to shape their gaming project on the same scale as you guys did before that.
I'll repeat that just to the mic here. So you were saying the ICO, when they raised, was a very professional process. They were very successful in getting lots of attention on Reddit and other outlets. And so the question was kind of around, how did they do that? Did they work? Who did the work? Did you work with agencies, or did you do it all yourself? That was the basic.
Oh, okay. Half and half. We did build a really good marketing team at the time for the whole process.
Was that internal, or did you work with an agency?
Both. I think that most of the great work was our internal marketing team. The team lead was a very technical guy. I think that the chief technological marketing officer is like it's a great role to have. We also used paid for the services of an agency, but yeah, it's I think that most of the success was attributed to our internal team.
Anything else on your question? He was curious about the names of the agencies, if you can share it, and if not, maybe offline you could communicate.
Yeah, definitely. I don't quite remember the name, but yeah.
Maybe
I
offline. You have
yeah.
a slide that you're going to share about communication about other things, so
Definitely.
that'll be appropriate.
Yeah.
Maybe one, maybe two questions, if anybody else has anything. Going once? Okay. What was your experience with A-Frame as the WebVR tool?
I like it.
How much did you raise also?
$25 million.
Oh, wow. When did you do your ICO?
When was the ICO?
August. In August the 18th.
And then the other question was, how has A-Frame been as a choice for web platform for VR?
I like it very much. It's a thin layer on top of 3JS. I don't think that the performance issues will be many from using A-Frame rather than using another thing. We're running into so right now we're using A-, which is a re-implementation of the markup language used by A-Frame. At some point, we are going to switch over back to A-Frame to take advantage of the whole ecosystem of components and then giving back to the A-frame community.
So maybe the analogy might be kind of like Markdown for HTML is kind of like a safer version of formatted text. So A- has similar or identical syntax to A-frame, but has safer, if you will, functionality.
Yes, exactly. By stripping away most of the functionality.
So that people can't do dangerous things or execute arbitrary code on a given parcel of land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we should wrap this up, Esteban. Is there anything else you want to add? You had a closing statement.
Yes. So I just wanted to say thanks for your time, for your attention. This is my contact information. Feel free to reach out. We have a lot of the things that we are building are open source. We're a small team, but of a very high quality. We are hiring right now. Yeah, I hope you join us helping build this world.
Awesome. Thank you, Esteban. Thank you, everyone in here.
Thanks.
Yay. Thanks. Great. We're going to stop the broadcast here, and we'll continue the meetup in Meet Space here in San Francisco.